What's up? This is Technically Correct with Tyler Bischoff, and on today's show, do you believe UNLV can actually win the Mountain West tournament? Or maybe just make a semifinal for the first time in over a decade. Plus, UNLV's football schedule is out, and it starts off very difficult, but very fun. And UNLV actually is still in debt. They are broke. They don't have a lot of money, unlike what we thought a month ago. So before we get into today's show, some updates for you. If you missed last episode, I got a new job. I will announce what that job is sometime in the near future. I'll let everybody know. Hopefully you guys will follow me over. Listen, it'll be a show again. Listen to me where I am going next. So stay tuned for that. In the meantime, I am going to keep Technically Correct alive. At least that's the plan. If you haven't been able to pick up on this, I'm probably going to do it once a week, and it's probably going to be UNLV focused. None of those are final decisions. We'll see how all of this actually plays out. But as of now, that's what I am leaning towards doing. So if you want to stick around for that, thank you very much. If you don't, I understand, but that's sort of going to be the plan going forward. That might change pending my new job and how much free time I have to do different things like this. But for now, you're getting UNLV content. Here we go. The Mountain West tournament is here, and UNLV can win it, right? It's the same thing every year. UNLV's hosting it. They could get hot at home. John Rothstein sends out his tweet about UNLV, and they could be a bid stealer. And again, don't forget, it's at the Thomas and Mack. It's in Las Vegas. They could do it. And yet they never have. Some fun stats for you. Well, probably not fun, but UNLV's record in the last 10 Mountain West tournaments is 5-10. They're 5-0 against Air Force. They're 0-10 against everybody else. For a complete decade, UNLV has only beaten one opponent in the Mountain West tournament, and it's Air Force. And I don't know if you've looked at the bracket, but they're not playing Air Force. So they're going to have to beat some teams not named Air Force to even have a shot at this, right? The last time they beat a team that wasn't named Air Force was 2015. That is absolutely insane. And beyond that, right, like it's at the Thomas and Mack. Everybody loves to bring up, oh, it's a home game for UNLV. I poke fun at John Rothstein because he's the super positive college basketball reporter that likes to say good things. And he's always, every single year, is tweeting about how it's at the Thomas and Mack. They could get hot. Despite all of these tournaments being at the Thomas and Mack, UNLV has not played in the semifinal of the Mountain West tournament since 2014. I'm not talking about winning it. I'm not talking about making it to the championship game. I'm saying they haven't played in a semifinal since 2014 of a tournament in their own gym. It is insane. It is improbable, regardless of how bad UNLV teams have been, that they have not gone on one run, and run's not even the right word because it's winning one or two games to the semifinal. They haven't done it since 2014. It is crazy how bad UNLV has been in the Mountain West tournament. Does this year's team change that? I don't know. Maybe they beat Wyoming and we can finally say it's not Air Force, but will they actually get to a semifinal? I don't think so, but we shall see. Now, if we look at the bracket, UNLV gets Wyoming to start. They only played once this year, and UNLV lost by 32 points. It was probably the worst game of the entire season. Even the losses in the non-conference to a bunch of crappy schools, losing to Wyoming by 32, probably worse. Now, losing by 32, fluky. Losing to Wyoming, though, probably not all that fluky. Wyoming actually finished the year 5-1. They won 5 of their last 6, and they beat Grand Canyon and Nevada in that stretch. The only loss was to Boise State, so they had some good performances there. But these are two, like, similarly ranked teams. If you look at Ken Pom or Bart Torvik, right, Wyoming's ahead of UNLV, but it's by about 10 spots or so. Ken Pom projects UNLV to win this game by 1 point. And interestingly, if you take February 1st to the end of the regular season, by Bart Torvik, UNLV is the 78th best team in the country, and Wyoming's the 80th. best team in the country. So to end the season, both of these teams are playing better than they were at the start of the season or the middle part of the season, and both are playing about the same level of good as well. And if you take it a bit further, as far as offensive efficiency goes, both teams are in the 80s in KenPom. Defensive efficiency, they're 130 something and 160 something. So pretty solid offensive teams, pretty bad defensive teams overall. So very similar teams. And again, to go back, KenPom projects a 1-point win for UNLV. It feels like UNLV is in their home gym. Dre Gibbs Lawhorn is going to be the best player on the floor. I think UNLV is going to win this game, but it's not a big enough margin. It's not a big enough or bad enough team in Wyoming to say that with any sort of conviction. I will say one big stat for you. It's kind of a few stats combined into one. But in Mountain West play, UNLV shot 39% from three, which was the best mark in the entire conference. Crazy turnaround from being, I mean, they were one of like the 10 worst teams in the country in three-point shooting in non-conference play. And then in conference play, they're like, yeah, we were just screwing with you. We can actually shoot. But number one in the Mountain West in three-point shooting in conference play. Wyoming was 11th. There's 12 teams in the conference now. So second to last at 31.8%. So you've got a big split in conference play of how these teams shoot from three. However, Wyoming took 46% of all of their field goal attempts from three, which was the second most in the conference. UNLV, only 36% of their shots in conference play were from three. That's the second fewest. So the team that shoots the best doesn't take that many threes, and the team that doesn't shoot very well takes a lot of threes. So on the UNLV side, right, I think you can make a pretty good argument that if they shot more threes, that percentage wouldn't be as high, because I know Tyron Jones took a three in the last game, but for the most part, UNLV is shooting threes when it's either Dre Gibbs Lawhorn or guys are wide open, right? They don't take a lot of threes for the sake of taking threes outside of Dre Gibbs Lawhorn, right? And even like the Tyron Jones one, the guy was wide open. Like, it's probably not best that he shoots. It's probably better if he drives to the rim, but I don't know how much you really want to blame it for like, oh yeah, this guy's just wide open. You can shoot one a game, right? So I think if they shot more, their percentage would go down quite a bit. I don't think this is the best shooting team in the Mountain West. I just think they don't take many, so the ones they take are a better value shot. But what it means that Wyoming takes a lot while not making a high percentage is in a single game, the three-point shooting might actually favor Wyoming if they have a hot shooting day. And if we look at the one matchup of these two teams, right, Wyoming beats UNLV, and Wyoming was 9 of 21 from three. That's 43%. UNLV actually shot better. They were 46% from three in that game. But UNLV took 11 threes, and Wyoming took 21. They took 10 more threes in the game, so both teams shot extremely well, but Wyoming had the better advantage because they simply took more. So if Wyoming gets hot, then that's the game, right? UNLV might lose the game because Wyoming gets hot and they shoot 25 threes, and UNLV is just not that type of team, and all of a sudden it becomes incredibly hard to keep up with. Wyoming fouls a lot, so UNLV could be at the free throw line to sort of make up for that, but like you then need that just to get back to even, then you have to go and win the game. So that's the big one for you, is that the three-point shooting, one team has a good percentage, the other team's a bad percentage, but they flip in terms of how often they shoot threes. And when your season's over in one game, that could be bad news if Wyoming does, in fact, make a lot of threes. If UNLV wins, they get Utah State. The part of this that's fascinating to me is I've seen Utah State fans on Twitter not wanting to play UNLV in the second round. And like, they might even have to. Wyoming might win the game. And obviously, UNLV, after sweeping Utah State, should have some confidence they can win that game. And it's funny how it played out, because the first matchup with Utah State, I think you could reasonably walk away from that and say, UNLV got hot. UNLV was maybe a little lucky, right? Tyron Jones made like all of his free throws. The guy's shooting 48% from the free throw line this year, and he was like 10 of 12 in that game, right? Like, you could justifiably say, all right, UNLV got hot. They played the best game they could possibly play and won at Utah State. It probably won't happen again. But the second game these two teams played, UNLV beat the hell out of Utah State. I mean, they crushed them. UNLV looked like the team that's an NCAA tournament lock that's worried about seeding, and Utah State looked like a team that has no chance to go to the NCAA tournament, right? Like, or NIT really. Is UNLV an NIT bubble team? It's a smaller NIT now, so probably not. But like, I don't know. It's just they smacked them, and so you go into this and you think, all right, you probably feel good about it. I think the one problem for this potential rematch for UNLV is that Utah State has known since Saturday that they're going to play the winner of UNLV and Wyoming, and that UNLV has to do full prep for Wyoming, play and beat Wyoming, and Utah State can rest up, right? And so basically what I think that means is Jared Calhoun, the Utah State head coach, is Jared Calhoun a good coach, right? Is there do they get a benefit from being able to sit back and prep for 3 full days while UNLV and Wyoming don't get that luxury? Do they have an advantage? Because if Jared Calhoun is a good coach, or at least if he's good at this part of coaching, then I think Utah State's going to have an advantage. Obviously, the rest matters. UNLV might play a nail biter. I mean, this team might go to overtime, right? We've seen that plenty, right? So, like, UNLV might play a nail biter and then 24 hours have to come back while Utah State's been off since Saturday. So the rest itself can make a difference, but also how good is Jared Calhoun at prepping? Because if you're UNLV, yes, there's advanced scouting. Yes, you're going to probably have one assistant coach, like sort of doing the pre-Utah State scout and all of that, but you still have to be like 90% focused on Wyoming. Again, KenPom projects a 1-point win. They're not playing Air Force. They're playing a team that can legitimately beat them, that beat them by 32 in the previous matchup. So you've got to be spending the majority of your time on Wyoming, whereas Utah State gets to spend 50%, maybe even the majority of their time on UNLV, depending on how they think this is going to go. So if Calhoun's good at that part of coaching, that might be what gives Utah State a win. Otherwise, I hope we see it. I hope we see the matchup because I would love to see him play for a third time. Honestly, this UNLV team is incredibly fun. I kind of want to see him play as much as possible, right? Like all the games are incredibly fun to watch. Like either we get like milestone things like 2 triple doubles in a season from Howie Fleming or 42 from Dre Gibbs Lawhorn, or we just get the dumbest possible endings where it's just like, yeah, one team was up by 12 with 2.5 minutes to go. They're not up by 12 anymore. The game's tied. That happens so much. So I'm on board for more UNLV games. They're a lot of fun. Now, I do want to go back to the San Diego State game they played to wrap up Mountain West play. They lose that game by 3 to end the regular season, last regular season meeting with San Diego State, unless they play in the Mountain West tournament. A couple of things. End game scenarios. I've got questions for both teams. Again, I'm going to keep asking this as long as Tyron Jones is at UNLV, which might not be much longer. But why are teams not fouling Tyron Jones late in games? Again, San Diego State did it on accident. There was 1:32 to go, and they were up 4, and they fouled Tyron Jones. He went 1 of 2 at the free throw line. But this is a guy who is shooting 48% from the free throw line. Close game scenarios. How are we not seeing hack-a-shack on Tyron Jones? Like, it seems like such an obvious strategy to go to. Coaches, is part of it coaches are just afraid to do something different? Because if you lose a game because Dre Gibbs Lawhorn hits a couple of threes, you just say, oh, that's an amazing player. There's nothing we can do. Whereas if you blow it because Tyron Jones went 5 for 6 at the free throw line and you fouled him intentionally, you're going to look like an idiot, even though that's clearly a better choice, right? If you asked any coach in the conference, would you rather, you're playing UNLV, would you rather their possession end with Dre Gibbs Lawhorn taking any shot or Tyron Jones shooting 2 free throws? They're all going to say, well, Tyron Jones shooting 2 free throws, but they won't do it. They won't foul him. I don't understand why teams aren't fouling him. Every game they play is close, and Tyron Jones is always on the floor. You got to foul the guy that can't make free throws. You just have to. Also, on the UNLV side, late in the game, UNLV gets the ball down 3, under 10 seconds to go. A chance to get to overtime. And they didn't do anything. Like, Dre Gibbs Lawhorn threw up a step-back 3, but, like, they didn't run a play. Now, Isaac Williamson did set a flare screen for Howie Fleming, but Dre Gibbs Lawhorn wasn't looking at it. And I don't know if that was a play call and Dre Gibbs Lawhorn ignored it, or if there wasn't really a play call and they were just kind of doing that on their own. Like, it just, like, you could have done something. Like, I know Dre Gibbs Lawhorn has been awesome, but just, hey, dribble up and shoot a step back 3. Like, you could have set a screen for him. That would probably have been nice. So, like, into game scenarios, not good. As much as college coaches, like, are anal about like details and their players doing it. Like they screw up things all the time late in games. Like coaching is bad. It's bad. And both of these coaches, I think, could have given their teams much, much better chance to win. Also, I believe this gets announced Monday, but Dre Gibbs Lawhorn for Mountain West Player of the Year. You think he's going to win it? Led the conference in scoring. Reminder, Conference Player of the Year is only about conference games. So non-conference games don't matter. Now, Dre Gibbs Lawhorn led the conference in scoring no matter how you break it down, but in conference play it was 23.6 points per game. He also shot 47.8% from three, which is wild. He put up 32 again against San Diego State. He had 4 games this year with 32 points. All of the other Mountain West players combined had 5 games of 32 points or more, so he had almost half of all the 32-plus point games this year. I think the real question on Mountain West Player of the Year, and if you want to vote for Dre Gibbs Lawhorn, is how much do you care about defense? Because Dre Gibbs Lawhorn is not a good defender. UNLV was pretty horrendous defensively this season. I mean, even Josh Pastner has called them the worst defensive team he's ever coached. And statistically, he's right. By Ken Pom rankings, it is. But and Dre Gibbs Lawhorn is a part of that. He was. I mean, just against San Diego State, late in that game, he's guarding BJ Davis, the guy who went for 30 against UNLV. Dre Gibbs Lawhorn is not a good defensive player. Now, all of their defensive problems, it's not like it's all on Dre Gibbs Lawhorn. They got a bunch of bad defensive players or a lot of guys that foul all the time, right? So they've got other issues, but if you care about defense, I understand why you couldn't even give the award to Dre Gibbs Lawhorn because he's a one side of the ball type of player. However, in the sport of basketball, when we give out awards, we often give them out because of what you do on one side of the ball, and that is the offensive end, right? We tend to care about offense, and defense is like, an afterthought. And if that's the case, Dre Gibbs Lawhorn is the best offensive player in the Mountain West this year. He had the best offensive performance of any player from start to finish in Mountain West play. And if that's all you care about, he's the Mountain West Player of the Year. I don't think it should be. I think you should care more about defense. I'm still annoyed that Nemish Queta, the center at Utah State, who's now with the Celtics, that I think he was left off the first team All Mountain West team by the coaching staff, by the coaches in the year that he was the defensive player of the year. Like, he was so good defensively at blocking shots that UNLV, when they played them, TJ Otzelberger told his players, don't try to shoot layups. He's going to block the shot. Take the mid-range jumper. Otzelberger, a guy who's anti-mid-range jumper, was like, yeah, that guy's too good. Just shoot the mid-range jumper. He affected game plans that much, and coaches were like, we don't think he's one of the 5 best players in the conference. It was insane. Absolutely insane. So the coaches that sit and tell you that, you got to play defense, they don't care about it either. Don't ever listen to him. So Dre Gibbs Lawhorn, I don't think he's going to win it. Offensively, had the best season. Defensively, if it matters to you, can absolutely ding him enough to not consider him for Mountain West Player of the Year. Or I shouldn't say consider, but not give him Mountain West Player of the Year. One last thing on basketball. I don't know if this Josh Pastner trait is something that he has always done and therefore will probably always do, or if it's just something that's a symptom of this year. But Josh Pastner has absolutely loved to ride lineups in games until the wheels fall off. And what I mean by that is at some point in the game, UNLV goes on an 8-0 run. Pastner is going to leave those 5 guys on the floor until whatever lead they built or whatever lead they overcame, all of it's completely gone because that lineup fell apart. And we saw it in the San Diego State game, right? We've seen it in a lot of these games. But I'll go back actually. The Utah State game, it worked out well for him. Dre Gibbs Lawhorn picked up 2 fouls in the first half, and then Dre Gibbs Lawhorn did not play the final 11 minutes of the first half. Now, Pastner is one of the most aggressive coaches in the country at playing guys with 2 fouls in the first half. Ken Pom actually tracks it. He's in the top 30, right? Pastner has no problem playing Dre Gibbs Lawhorn when he has 2 fouls in the first half, but he didn't for 11 straight minutes in the first half because UNLV went on a run. And UNLV ended up in those final 11 minutes outscoring Utah State by 8, right? It worked out in that regard. He sat Dre Gibbs Lawhorn. The lineup that was on the floor went on a run, so he just stuck with it. And it worked. Now, they outscored Utah State by 19 points in the second half when Dre Gibbs Lawhorn played, so maybe they would have had a bigger halftime lead if he had come back in the 11 minutes, but it worked in the Utah State game. But against San Diego State, we saw it again. UNLV got off to a hot start, and Josh Pastner, who didn't start Tyron Jones, just left Tyron Jones on the bench for 8 minutes. I think it's bad coaching. Tyron Jones is one of the 3 best players on this team, and he should not be on the bench for the first 8 minutes of any game. But why did Pastner do that? It's because UNLV went on an 8-0 run that put them up 19-11. So Pastner didn't want to make any substitutions after that happened, and he didn't make a single one for 8 minutes. He finally made a substitution after San Diego State scored 7 straight points and retook the lead. So this lineup goes on a run, and Pastner is like, I'm sticking with it. And then it's all gone, and then he finally subs. That's what he has done, right? And here's the problem with that specific example. Why did UNLV go on this 8-0 run? Why were they up 19-11? It's because they made 4 of their first 5 three-pointers. UNLV they weren't playing like unbelievable. They just hit a bunch of threes, right? And as a basketball coach, as a basketball fan, as a basketball media member, we all know teams will get hot from 3, hit 4 in a row, hit 4 out of 5, go on a big run, and then not hit one for 8 minutes. They can be the same exact shots. But basketball is like that. But Pastner lets his lineups be impacted, lets his rotations be impacted by that kind of variance. And I think that's bad coaching. I don't think that's good. I don't think you should be saying, well, I'm not going to play Tyron Jones or Dre Gibbs-Lawhorn. They're normal minutes because Walter Brown hit a couple of threes or Howie Fleming hit a couple of threes. Like if the team, it's what you have to balance as a coach, and the NBA is a lot more rigid with this than college basketball, but it just feels like, yeah, your best players should be playing, right? Like, yes, if Walter Brown hits a couple of threes while Howie Fleming's on the bench, maybe Walter Brown earns a few more minutes, but not at the expense of your best players, right? Because take the Utah State example. Again, it worked, but does anybody believe UNLV is better with Dre Gibbs-Lawhorn on the bench? No. But Josh Pastner kind of told us that for 8 minutes. He's like, I'd rather him sit because these other guys are hot. I don't like that coaching because ultimately, as a coach, you shouldn't be making decisions on these super small sample sizes, right? Like I want a coach that's making the decisions on the bigger sample sizes and going with that as opposed to we hit a couple of threes in a row, so we're going to keep rolling this out. It's going to stop. It's going to burn up. So I don't like that. We've seen it a lot from Pastner this year. Again, it might be a case of it just being this season because they did have a lot of injuries. They had a lot of guys in and out of the lineup early on. Figuring out who the best lineup was took a lot of time. You could argue Pastner still doesn't know. But like it's been a weird season. If next year is more normal and, you have your starting 5 and you have your 2 or 3 bench players that you rely on, and you're going to have injuries, but you don't have anybody that's like, oh, he's out for 10 games or he's out for the season. We got to try other guys. Maybe it's not quite as loose. It's not quite as fluid with how Pastner's going to play his guys, and it's a little bit more rigid with the rotation. Now, on to football. Couple of things on football. First off, the schedule is out. UNLV, we knew who they were playing, but we did not know the order. And the fascinating part to me is the start of the schedule. UNLV opens with Memphis. We knew that. They're going to host Memphis. But their second game of the year is at Hawaii. There's no bye week before. There's no bye week after. UNLV is going to Hawaii and coming back with no bye, and it's the second game of the season. And then they go to North Texas in their third game. They have a bye after that. So those first 3, I think they section off nice in the schedule because of the bye week being after there. And also they section off because of the difficulty of opponents, right? Those are 3 of the toughest teams UNLV is going to play next season. New Mexico is on the schedule. We'll see how good North Dakota State is. But those are 3 of the best teams. There's a real chance we get to the end of the year, and those are the 3 best teams that UNLV plays at the end of the year. But what it means is that we're going to know, like, right away if UNLV has a chance at the playoffs or not, right? Memphis, probably legitimate playoff contender, or group of 6 playoff contender, I should say. Hawaii, probably behind UNLV in the Mountain West pecking order, but still in the top half, in the top third, and you're going to Hawaii, you can absolutely lose that game. And then at North Texas, we'll see how good they are, but they could be a playoff contender as well, right? And being on the road makes it difficult too. So if UNLV comes out of that stretch at 3-0, they're probably at the top of the group of 6 playoff talk for the entirety of the season, right? Because it's not a power conference win. They do play Cal, so they'll get a shot at one, but that's about as good as you can do without beating a power conference team. So if they come out of that 3-0, it's a real conversation the entire year. If they come out of it 2-1, they're probably not going to be at the top of the conversation, but they're still in the mix, right? 2-1 out of that is fine. 1-2, you're probably done for. You probably have to win out. 1-2, you're probably done for. 0-3, sorry, talk to you next year when it comes to the playoffs. So we're going to know right away. 1-2 is the record that would kind of leave us like, all right, how good are they actually going to be? But anything else, we're going to know basically right off the bat how real is a playoff hope for UNLV, because this is where it's interesting for UNLV. If you break the schedule up, the first 3 and then the back 9, that's a golf term, the back 9 there. I'm using SP Plus from last year. Yell at me, it's last year's rankings and there's the transfer portal, everybody changes. But based on last year, the 3 teams they play to open were all top 70 in SP Plus. All 3 top 70, and their average SP Plus ranking was 43rd. After that first bye and the last 9 games of the year, the only team that was in the top 70 of SP Plus last year is New Mexico. Technically, North Dakota State could count as that because their SP Plus was high enough to be top 70, but they weren't Division I, so maybe we should say 2. But New Mexico is the only team top 70, and the average SP Plus of the last 9 teams they play was 96. So if UNLV goes 3-0 or even 2-1, there's a real chance they're favored in every game the rest of the season, right? At New Mexico, maybe not. But home against Cal, if they're 3-0 to start the year, they're probably favored at home against Cal, right? Home against North Dakota State, they're probably favored if they get off of that 3-0 start, right? So there's a real chance that UNLV is favored in their last 9 games of the season. So if you're 3-0, you can probably afford a loss and still be the top group of 5 playoff team, assuming you go on and win the Mountain West Championship game. Boise State's not here, so they could do that, right? If you lose one of those games early, you might be able to afford one more loss. Maybe you're going to be bringing resumes in, but like that's the schedule's easy. And after those first 3, it's really easy. So those first 3 are super important. And then it's sort of like, all right, if UNLV's in the mix, they're just going to be counting off the wins. I know that's a weird thing to say for UNLV football, but they should be. They should absolutely be counting off wins against teams like they end the year with Nevada. Northern Illinois was not good last year and lost their coach in February, right? San Jose State, Wyoming, the Air Force. These are teams UNLV should be counting off the wins. Cal, North Dakota State, and New Mexico will probably be tough. Those are not like free wins, but if they beat Memphis and Hawaii and North Texas, it's hard to imagine they're going to lose all 3 to Cal, North Dakota State, and New Mexico. So, or it could be bad. It could be bad. They could lose all 3, and we're like, well, this season's over. But it's going to be a fun start to the season. A couple other things for you. First off, UNLV is actually broke. Mick Akers of the Review-Journal had a story, and they are still $26.7 million in debt. So that budget they had from last month that was like, oh, look, UNLV made a profit. They're still in debt from previous years carrying over, however that works. What's probably bad is from the story that Mick Akers wrote, people at UNLV are like, okay, we've got a plan to handle it. It's going to be institutional support and the money coming in from the Pac-12. Okay. That might work. However, I feel like that's a bad plan. Like if your plan is just, oh, the university is just going to give us money. And hey, remember when our conference almost fell apart and then we were promised a bunch of money from the Pac-12? That's our answer. Neither one of those are actually like, hey, we're going to save money here or we're going to generate more money here, which is what you would want to hear. Neither one of those is the answer. It's, yeah, UNLV is just going to give us some more. I don't know. Is their chemistry class making a bunch of money they can lend to UNLV football? Is that what they need? Which, by the way, if you remember the budget, the thing that's fascinating about all this, UNLV football, we're at the height of UNLV football's success. The program lost money last year. UNLV football did not generate a profit. They lost money. How does that work? You'd think winning and you'd have money, but if they're losing money, where does UNLV actually generate more money from? Oh, the Pac-12 is supposed to pay us a whole bunch of money. If that's the answer, I guess that's the answer. Which brings us to the other story. John Canzano wrote over the weekend, or last week, I should say, that the Pac-12 still wants UNLV. So key detail here, the Pac-12 has to add at least one more football member before 2027 because I guess according to John Canzano, their media rights deal is not going to be fully fulfilled unless they add one more football playing member. So they've got to add somebody else. And according to John Canzano, they still want UNLV. The only way I can see UNLV going to the Pac-12, right, is if the Mountain West completely falls apart and doesn't exist anymore, right? Or the Pac-12 like wins the lawsuit and suddenly they owe the Mountain West $0, and so UNLV is not getting any of the exit fees from the Pac-12 schools, right? Because the whole point of UNLV staying in the Mountain West was the money, was to get the money because they're broke, right? It was to get the money to pay off the debt, and they didn't want to have to pay an exit fee. So I can't imagine UNLV leaving, having to pay an exit fee to then join a conference now because they already made their decision on this. If the Mountain West doesn't exist, then obviously that changes the story. So I can't imagine they're leaving. What actually would be funny, right? If UNLV leaves, does the Mountain West still exist? Because there was a 24-hour period where it was like UNLV and Air Force were kind of deciding the fate of the Mountain West. And if they were going to leave and one go to the Pac-12, one go to the American, and basically the Mountain West would, I mean, it probably still would have existed, but it would have been, oh my God, who is left in this conference, right? There was a chance the Mountain West is going to be dead. But UNLV chose to stay. And so at this point, if UNLV were to leave, Mountain West, I mean, they'll be worse off, but they'll be fine. They've already backloaded programs. They've got enough programs. Would Air Force leave? Maybe eventually. They're probably going to end up in the American and just join Navy and Army. But like, they've backloaded enough. I think they'd be fine. So I don't think the Mountain West is just going to disappear. I don't think that's going to happen. And so it leaves the Pac-12 again in the same scenario of, wow, they really thought they were a bigger deal than they actually were. Because if you remember the timeline on this, they poached the Mountain West schools. And their plan was to poach the San Diego States and the Boise States, right? Poach some of the top of the Mountain West, their first four, and then go get the best teams from the American. Go get the Memphis and the South Florida from the American, right? And basically take the two group of 5 conferences that are good, lop off their best teams, you take them, now you're the best group of 5 conference or group of 6 conference, and those two conferences are severely hurt. And now you've got Oregon, Washington State, and 8 new solid members coming in for not a power conference, but a good 10-team conference. The problem is the teams in the American said, no, thank you. We're not interested in that, which meant the Pac-12 came back to the Mountain West and was like, oh, please, dear God, UNLV, will you come? And like Utah State said yes, but all it was please UNLV, and they got Utah State, but no UNLV. And they just overshot how good they thought they were going to be, right? And so now they might have to pay the Mountain West a bunch of money, and UNLV is going to get some of that money, and they're going to backload with who? They already said no to Sacramento State. Like, who do they backload with? I don't know, but they apparently got to add one more team, and it's probably not going to be a good one because UNLV is saying no to them. I don't know who it's actually going to be at the end of the day. Last thing on UNLV and UNLV football, UNLV got a quarterback to commit, a 3-star quarterback named Luke Farrell in the class of 2027. And first off, you can never have too many quarterbacks. I think UNLV should know that more than any other program. How many times have you watched a season where the backup has had to become the starter because the starter got hurt or the starter was just bad, right? It happens every year, pretty much. And on top of that, how many times has the backup been better than the starter? Incredibly high amount of times. Either there's a quarterback battle into the season or the backup's just straight up better than the starter. And we get to like game 4 and we're like, what the hell was this coaching staff? It's happened to like all of the coaches. Everyone they've had since I've been here. Yeah, they can't evaluate the quarterbacks in preseason. And then we get to week 4 and we're like, how did you not figure this out? Right? So having more quarterbacks, always good. Never think you're set at quarterback. But follow me in this roundabout way. But Luke Farrell, or Farrell, I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce his last name. He is a top 60 quarterback in the class of 2027, right? So he's in the 50s, somewhere in there. Which is right for the level of program UNLV is. And what I mean by that is like, imagine if every college football program landed exactly one high school quarterback every single year, right? Obviously, it doesn't work that way, but imagine if it did and it matched up where the best program got the highest ranked quarterback, right? So who do we want to say is the best? Ohio State or Georgia or something like that. They get number 1, number 2, and so on. And you just work your way down to where the 70th best program gets the 70th best. The 33rd gets the 33rd best quarterback, right? UNLV would be somewhere in the 50s, right? Like if we ranked all the programs, you're going to have the majority, if not all of the power conference teams are going to be ahead of all of the group of 5 teams, group of 6 teams. And UNLV would be towards the top of that group of 6, which puts you somewhere in the 50s. And so this is like a roundabout way of me saying this is who UNLV is. And in theory, Dan Mullen's going to leave at some point, right? In theory, you're going to make a bad hire and have some bad years, but as long as college football stays how it is right now, which might not be that much longer, but with a power group of conferences and then the group of 6, I think it's fair to expect UNLV is going to be at the top of that group of 6. Again, not every single year. You're going to have, they might have a down year this year, right? They might lose 5 games and we're like, not a bad year, but it wasn't a good year. So, but generally speaking, on a 5-year or 10-year stretch, UNLV should be towards the top of the group of 6 in football. And I think we're getting enough signs that that's going to keep happening. Their transfer class and their high school recruiting class, right? We're both at the top, if not the top, of recruiting rankings, transfer portal ranking, right? Of group of 6 anyways, right? They're getting a quarterback that's in the top 60. That's about where they should be. They're not going to be challenging Alabama. They're not going to be challenging the top of the SEC and the Big 12, but they can get this level of player. This is the level of player they should be getting at the end of the day. So it's just sort of another, I think, sort of reassurance that, yeah, UNLV football can do this. UNLV football can be here, should be here at this point, right? How much money is Dan Mullen getting paid compared to the other group of 5 coaches? It's a lot. It's the most, I think, right? Still. So it's just like, this is where UNLV should be. Get to the playoffs, right? Like that should be a goal. It should be a realistic goal for this program. It doesn't mean missing the playoffs is a bad season, but it's like, that's what you should be contending for on a fairly regular basis. But this has been Technically Correct. I'm Tyler Bischoff. Thank you so much for tuning in.